Happy lunchtime, everyone, and welcome. I am Helen Harrison with the Northwest Eco Building Guild. I am here with Ellie. Both of us are part of the Slam and Summit Planning Committee. And just a quick note to view your presentation better, you can minimize your chat box off to the right, and you can also select the 4 arrows in the top right corner of any of the screens in front of you. I'd like to take a moment to honor the land that we currently occupy. On behalf of the Northwest Eco Building Guild, we acknowledge that we're all on traditional land of the first people of this region. We honor with gratitude the land itself and thank the tribal people who've been faithful stewards of the land, water, and ancient history of life. Here in Seattle, where I am, we are occupying the land of the Duwamish. Peace, dignity, and equality on a healthy planet. This from the United Nations is simply stated, but deeply resonates with our committee as we think about you and the need in our communities at this moment. We believe that you are the group of people to set an example for how to support one another and move through this time together to arrive in a better place. Now we'd like to thank our sponsors. Our sustaining sponsors for this event are King County Green Tools, Dunn Lumber, and Pharos Creative. Here you will see our supporting sponsors, and we've got many of them. We couldn't do it without them. And finally, we've got our contributing sponsors. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors who've helped make this event possible. And before we really get started, as we finish up our presentation, many of you are already familiar with REMO. We've got the floor plan below. If you run into any issues, ask someone at your table for help. They probably know how to resolve it. If something really doesn't seem right, and many problems can be resolved simply by moving to another table or exiting the session and popping back in. And if you have mic camera issues, you can see the 3 bars in the top left corner of your screen. And you can also ask any one of our event hosts for help as well. Just look for the yellow star on their icon. Ellie is here with me to help anyone that does have technical issues. If they want to just put it in the general chat or chat with her privately, feel free to do so. We are going to save Q&A until the end, so feel free along the way to put any questions you have over in the Q&A tab. This course is AIA approved. If you haven't picked up your CEU reporting form, Ellie has placed it in the chat. You can download it from there. Now I'm excited to introduce our speaker for the session, How Going Green Saved the Day in Overcoming a Public Relations Nightmare. Tom Phillips is with us. Under Tom's direction, High Point, a 1,600 unit mixed use master planned community, became a national and international award-winning neighborhood. He's the author of the recently released High Point, the Inside Story of Seattle's First Green Mixed Income Neighborhood. Now, Tom, if you will join me here on stage by turning on your camera and mic, we can get started. Tom, can you hear me? Your microphone is off.
I can hear you.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today and thank Helen for her introduction and working with me on this whole project. So Helen's going to control the slides here because my generational problem with doing some of the work with the computer. But basically, I ran High Point for 10 years, from 2001 to 2011, and I'm very proud of all the green achievements and the fact that we were the model for LEED ND in the country. We got in. They were creating the criteria for it and used us to figure out how to put it together. And so I'm very proud of our green achievements and you'll see, even though this presentation is about the outreach program we did in terms of changing the perception about what High Point was about and working with our people who more than 700 families who lived at High Point. That's mostly what this talk is about. But you'll see that I occasionally will slip into some of our green achievements. Use them as examples, but I'm just proud of what we were able to accomplish at High Point. And if those if you haven't been to High Point, I urge you to go. Partly, you'll get a sense of what is special about it, and how green did save the day and continues to save the day. Just pick a day when it's sunny and just drive around High Point, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I was working for the Seattle Housing Authority, and when I got the assignment to take over running High Point, I had a background in outreach, working on the visual preference survey, working on energy rated homes with a group at the University of Washington. So we created a prototype of how to evaluate green building, and so this was kind of an ideal job for me, and I was very excited about taking over. So this first slide shows basically how and why the city of Seattle was so interested in working with us on creating the green community at High Point. And what it shows is that High Point is the water that leaves High Point represents is in the Longfellow Creek watershed, and about 8% of the water that goes into that creek comes from High Point. And the city's perspective was, if we can upgrade the quality of that water, we can improve the water and the salmon bearing the salmon, the quality of the creek as a way for as a place for salmon to spawn. So that got the city of Seattle involved in our project, and ended up being a very successful joint venture with them. So Seattle, next slide. The Seattle Housing Authority, where I work, owns a lot of property, and one of the pieces of property they were looking at that they owned in 2001 was High Point. It was a very rundown community. The buildings were in really bad shape. The infrastructure was in really bad shape. And in the 1990s, High Point got a well-deserved reputation as a dangerous place. The crack cocaine epidemic was going on, and it was not a safe place to be and a place to live. Although I have to say that my perception and most of people's perception about High Point was that it was a dangerous, unpleasant place to be. But in fact, the community, and for people who lived in the community, it had a lot of value and was something that they, in fact, cherished. I'll give you an example of what a dangerous place it was when we first showed the plan for greening the site to the people who were living at High Point at the time. They said, no, you can't do that. You can't put bushes like that. You can't have those mature trees. It will provide people with a place to hide, and bad folks with a place to hide, and won't feel as safe. So there was a real built-in notion that High Point wasn't a safe place, and we better not do anything to change it to make it more unsafe. And in fact, if you ask those people today, they'd give you a whole different answer to it. Next slide, Helen.
Hey, Tom, could you try holding your mic closer to your mouth? It's a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So High Point is actually literally in the middle of West Seattle. It's 120 acres. when there's a bridge and little traffic, it's only about a 10-minute drive to downtown Seattle. Our program that we were creating at High Point was to build 1,600 units and create a diverse socioeconomic and culturally community. We have a small mixed-use site on 35th Avenue, and as I said, 8% of the water goes into Longfellow Creek. 35th Avenue is the main arterial that's on the left-hand side of that image, and to the east of 35th was a redlined area from the 1930s, and it had really affected the way the world and West Seattle looked at High Point. And so we were going to have a challenge. We were going to work with builders to build 600 for sale houses. We were going to prepare the site and sell the land to them. But in order for the project to work, we had to sell the land at a pretty high price to them, so they would in turn sell it, and we'd share in the revenue. But we had this problem with the reputation of not only from the 90s, but from the 30s as a red line community. So our work was cut out for us. Go ahead and next. This just gives you an idea of the schedule of our construction. I started in 2001. We started building the infrastructure in 2004, and about half of the rental units in the first phase, and then in 2008 we started the second phase of building the rental units, and we had finished the rental units by 2009. The for sale units came along later, and it's a whole nother story about how in 2008 we were facing bankruptcy and a real problem because all the builders had walked away, and we had already built all the infrastructure and the rental housing. And so that's a story that is obviously in the book. The for sale housing has taken till now. The last for sale house is about finished, and so High Point is almost finished. Next. As I said, I can't help but talk about some of the green initiatives we undertook, and I just love this slide of structural decking that we harvested from the old units. We did get an opportunity to deconstruct 22 of the units, and one of the really valuable things was this old growth decking that we were able to save. Unfortunately, when we did the deconstruction of the 22 units, we couldn't convince the contractor that we should get some of the money from the sale of in this case the structural decking. So the economics of the deconstruction didn't work for us in this particular project, and I think it had to do with what they were finding in the units. It turned out to be a very, very, very effective way to train people about construction, because they got to know the buildings pretty well. Next. So when we thought about what we were doing at High Point, we came up with this drawing here, and it puts the outreach program into a perspective. And that is the outreach, the engaged community was 1/3 of our effort, and another was to create a healthy community, and another was quality design, and that was a theme throughout what we were doing. Uh, Healthy community and engaged community came together very early in our project, and that one of the tenants told us that asthma was a problem at High Point and a big problem with the other residents. And we looked into it, and sure enough, it's kind of the incidence of asthma is about twice as high for low-income families as it is for the general population. And so we were doing integrated design and had some people with some access to public health workers, and we got some people assigned. We raised some money and built in the end 60 breathe easy units for families with children with asthma. We ended up doing a follow-up study about the impact of those families, and the healthy community really paid off for them. So there we upgraded with the design of the units, mostly with a quality HEPA filter, but we did some other kinds of things to upgrade the units. And that's an example of kind of tying those things together, the engaged community and the healthy environment and the quality design. So we ended up more than doubling the density at High Point. Now, one could look at what all the outreach effort that we undertook to put us in good stead with the city council, so that when the entitlement package that we needed to create High Point went before them, that we would get a favorable response. Well, that is true, but the entitlement package, while it did allow us to move some buildings around and build certain kinds of buildings, we didn't directly ask for increased density, but we were able to build more on the site. So as a real secondary and important side effect of this outreach effort that I'm going to just jump into here in a minute, was that the city council was very supportive and gave us the kinds of entitlements we needed to build the kind of community that we ended up building. Next. So I'm going to jump to this last point on this slide, and that is the green site upgrades added value to what we were doing. And the more I thought about that, and the more I think about it, it continues to add value to what we were doing. This is a detention pond that in a lot of projects that were built around that time would have had a fence around it with that you couldn't get to the building to get it, and it would be a real distraction and a negative impact on the site. We turned that around and said, let's make this pond, which is part of the natural drainage system, has to do with the quality of water that was released from the site and then went into Longfellow Creek. We made it a very attractive piece of property, and increase the value of these for sale housing that are above it. It continues to be a real attraction for the community and for the neighborhood. And green kind of came back and pays for itself in many ways. So our outreach program consisted, in addition to adding value on the site, we retained a traditional marketing company who had worked with builders. So we were going to market the for sale housing. we entered into a co-op agreement. So we put in some money, they put in some money, and we came up with a marketing plan and would buy advertisements, radio time, and all those kinds of things with the builders to help them sell the houses. And then we also hired a general public relations firm called PRR to look at and change the reputation. And I want to get to the 12 talking points that we use to really change the perception of the community in the eyes of everybody, and particularly West Seattle. Okay. So one of the things we did to jumpstart our effort at selling houses was to create something called the Green Living Expo. And maybe some of you came to that. I know that Helen came to it, and it helped persuade her to buy a house eventually at High Point. So we had like 7,000 visitors over 2 weekends. Here's an example of the guided tour we were giving, and it people coming to High Point, that was not the old reputation of High Point was not on their mind. They wanted to learn more about green living, and we had a big tent with exhibits. Probably some of you had exhibits at there, and then we gave these tours. Here the architect is walking a group around, showing them the details and what they would see on the site. Okay, Helen. Here's some more images. I can't, what is this thing on the right? I put it up there. Maybe somebody could tell me. I think it has to do with compost, but it was part of the Green Living Expo. And here's some unfinished buildings and a group of people on a guided tour. I ended up actually, this image reminds me because it's about the time that my wife and I got married at High Point, and there's pictures of these unfinished buildings, and we got married and used that playground as a location for the ceremony. Next. So our effort to do marketing included very traditional kinds of things, and here's a billboard at High Point that tells you kind of a couple things. One of them is, and it says from the low 2000s. So it tells you basically this is an old poster that was probably from 2005. And I wanted to mention where we are now and how we've been successful in taking advantage of the very strong housing market in Seattle. So, and what we mostly focused on when we looked at the housing prices and the median house prices that were sold at High Point, we looked at what the prices were compared to West Seattle and the city of Seattle. So in 2019, the median price at High Point was $702,000. The median price in Seattle was $775,000. And in West Seattle was $665,000. So High Point beat the median price for West Seattle. So, there is a very tangible way to measure how successful our marketing effort was, and that's it. I mean, there's no question that the wind was blowing at our back and has been, except for in 2008, in terms of supporting the sales price. I wanted, can you go back for a second, Linda? Helen, to that one last shot. There's something else that's very interesting about it, and is part of the whole Me Too movement and what was going on with George Floyd. And one of the things that I did, and there are interviews in the back of the book with people who were living at High Point or previously lived at High Point. And I talked to a number of young women who had lived at High Point, had grown up at High Point, and now are kind of out of college and out in the world, and they remembered this this billboard because it made them really angry. And in retrospect, I can understand why they did that. This was their community, and here we were using this blonde woman to promote buying houses at High Point, and it showed a lack of sensitivity on our part and our home builders part in terms of what we were doing, and the fact that just like Helen talked about whose land this was. And we were working on, a lot of former residents of High Point looked at it as their land, their community, and what are we doing having blonde women promoting property? This is not what their community looks like. So that's a level of sensitivity that we didn't live up to. And okay, move on to the next. One of and this gets to really the marketing program that we put together, and that is with PRR we came up with something that is pretty standard in marketing and promotion. It has to do with talking points. So we came up with 12 different talking points, and this is something that we found particularly useful because we were creating newsletters. I was giving talks to the Chamber of Commerce, the Kiwanis, any group any neighborhood group. I was out frequently on weeknights talking about what we were doing in High Point, and the substance of what I was telling people had to do with these 12 talking points, and one of them, I think it's in the next slide. The substance of it, and it's actually I have a longer version of that first talking point. And what's important about it is that it has to be true, which was really important for us to make sure we followed that. So the full talking point says High Point development will knit the neighborhood back into the greater West Seattle fabric physically by connecting the street grid, economically by placing over half of the site on the Seattle tax rolls, and socially by providing housing for people of all incomes. So the newsletters, the talks, all the information that my walking around and meeting and talking to all the neighbors around High Point, those are these talking points. And one of these, was just gave me something very clear to say. And even though it got kind of boring saying it, 100 times over the 2 or 3 years, it got to be what people believed, and it was important to our success. And in fact, when we went up to get the final okay from the city council for the entitlements for the site, I heard one city council member actually repeat back that this new High Point knit back into the greater fabric of West Seattle. So I knew that we had been successful in getting these talking points across to the community. We did more than talk, stand in front of rooms and talk. I actually this wasn't in my introduction from Helen, but I was a consultant to master plan developers around the country and to cities also before I took the job working for the Housing Authority and redeveloping High Point. And one of the things I did was visual preference surveys and really, because I believe, and the more I did it, the more I believed it, is that people who live in a community have very strong ideas about what their community should look like and what the features should be. It's not always easy to find out what they're thinking, and showing them images of the of possible housing and community buildings should look like. They have no trouble discerning what it is that fits their values. So we use visual preference surveys. We did this solicitation of our ideas in many different forums. One of them was a community, a neighborhood fair we held at the elementary school gym, and where we did things like took people on tours of the immediate neighborhood and pointed out the legacy trees that we would be saving as part of the redevelopment. We saved 110 of them on the site. We had them paint their name, their initials on the fence slats that would go up in the community, and help. They help tell us what should be in the parks. So we did a lot of two-way communication, and I've participated, or I've watched community outreach programs that are just community outreach programs, and they go out and give information, but they don't really listen and they don't give feedback. Sorry, some just showed up on the screen. And what I was getting at is, it's important that you actually listen, because I really believe that there's a lot of wisdom in the community. And I'll give you an example in this next slide of what the differences are in the community. Well, first there's this is from the neighborhood fair, where we did a spot exercise where people who liked this image or disliked it, and they put up a smiley face, blue, a green one, or red one to tell us what images they like. And then the next slide will show a mailer that we sent out to the community. Well, no, it actually shows the results of what we got that day. And if you look carefully at this slide, hopefully you can see it. All the green dots are under houses that have clearly gable roofs, variety of modulation, have some color, have really strong front porches, big windows, and so those are some of the features that we ended up building and putting into the housing, and also put into our design guidelines for other for sale builders to put in place. And the next slide will show you a flyer that we sent out to the whole neighborhood to solicit information about what kind of housing they wanted to see built at High Point. And what's interesting about this, because I was working for the Housing Authority and we wanted to save some money, so we did this flyer in the High Point neighborhood, but we also did it at Rainier Vista, which we were developing at the same time, which is in Rainier Valley. And the results we got back were very different. And that had to do with Rainier Vista is much more of a sort of cutting edge, artistic community, and people wanted more modern housing. And I'm glad to report that if you go to Rainier Vista now, and look at some of the for sale building. And it's pretty modern and very different from what we ended up building at High Point, because that was what the community was telling us they wanted to see. And I do think that there is a aesthetic that people want to see that is common for the people who move into any or living in any particular community. Next. So one other thing, or one of the things we did was we created a stakeholders group of community leaders, businesses, and we would meet with them every quarter, go over in some detail what we were doing, what the design decisions were, and get feedback. Here's a young version of me in front of that group. And one of the things, mostly this group just gave us positive feedback on what we were doing, because we were kind of listening to them. We would every time we would meet with them, we'd say, here's what we heard from you last time, and give them feedback. One time they actually revolted against us. We showed them a plan of how we would put the rental housing and the for sale housing on the High Point site. And they looked at it and said, no, you can't do that, because the plan we had come up with was to put the for sale housing on the perimeter. And what that does is at High Point, it would give the for sale builders the best sites with the best views. So you go to High Point today, you'll see, lots of for sale buildings with good views, but you also see some rental housing with very good views too. And that was the result of us listening and really responding to what our stakeholder group had to say. Next. So we also, of course, met with the people who were living, the low-income residents who were living in High Point. We had lots of kind of business to go over with them, having to do with when they would move, their relocation benefits, but also that we wanted them to come back to the redeveloped High Point. And about 30% of them did. And so we shared with them their building plans as we were going along. Now there are at least 6 or 7 languages at High Point spoken, with a very large immigrant population, and you can probably get a sense of it from this image. And so these were difficult, long meetings, trying to convey what we were doing so people really understood it. Next. We were also able to have smaller meetings with different ethnic groups. And here's an example where we're showing images to people, asking for their opinion, why they like it, what are the features that they like in it, and recording what they had to say, and having those ideas reflected in the design guidelines. Next. One of the I thought really cool ideas that we came up with was to we built an amphitheater in the park at High Point, and the amphitheater had a kind of a stage with some wooden boards on it, and we wanted to put some carvings on the boards. So we met with a group of about 30 teenagers and asked them, well, what should we have carved on these boards? And they understood what High Point was and had this diverse population. And what they came up with was diverse birds from around the world. So we ended up getting some people who lived at High Point to help carve some of these bird silhouettes, and that's what we have in the community, which we're really happy how that turned out. Next. It wasn't all work. We also had parties and got together, with people and didn't always just ask them for their opinion, but encourage people to get to know each other. And here we are at the Commons Park, getting people getting in line for food, which which is a very important part of what all the outreach was. Make sure, I was told early and often, to make sure you feed people when you get them together. Next. So here's what, if you haven't been to High Point, all the results of all those visual preference surveys and the image we were working on. Here's what High Point looks like. This happens to be the rental housing. But if you think back at some of those images from the High Point Fair, this is very close to what they were looking at, and what all those green positive dots were about. So one of the things they actually told us was, don't build barracks, build big houses. It can be, and these are multifamily units. You can see by the number of staircases. So these are duplexes, and mostly, and so, but it doesn't look institutional, and it looks like a regular community, and it's a way for us to accommodate a lot of houses. So if you haven't been to High Point, go take a look. Next. So as I mentioned, we did the natural drainage system that promoted the quality of the water and created these swales around the site. We used amended soil because the amended soil can absorb the water that comes off the street when it rains, and then makes its way through in pipes through to the pond. But this is a real strong feature. So the green, this is as a result of our efforts to green the community. So it ends up being a very attractive feature in High Point to this day. I think if you show this image to a lot of people around the country, they wouldn't believe you that this is a half public housing project. Next. One of the things that, as a result of the amended soil, we amended the soil so that water could go through it, was that the tree canopy just took off, particularly with these birch trees in the community. And so, these were planted probably in 2005, so they're 15 years old. But these trees really make a difference in the feel of High Point, and it gets back at adding value, and how green was such a good investment for us, such a good idea, such a good way to take the community. Next. So I needed to show at least one photovoltaic array that's High Point. We really didn't use solar panels in the houses, although we set them up so they could be put on. And I know Helen and a couple other people have put them on their houses. This photovoltaics is on the neighborhood center. That's a LEED green building that's kind of in the center of the community. It gives you an idea of what happened with the trees, and how phenomenal they look now. And it's a result of, we would have had trees if we hadn't said, okay, we're going to make this a really green community. But I don't think they would be as prominent and look so good and be such a strong feature. Next. So this is my little plug for my book. A lot of what I've talked about today is in the book, a lot more detailed, and the stories about things like when the housing market fell apart and how we were able to recover from it and not go bankrupt, and things that of personal interest, that was the experience I had in building the community. So that's it for me this afternoon, except I'm very eager to hear your questions, and answer them. I think I have some here. Now, Helen, can everybody see these questions?
So folks are making some comments in the chat here. Tom Balderston mentioned
We can't hear you, Helen. I mean, you're very, very, very quiet. But yes, to answer your question, Tom, everyone can see the questions.
So I don't.
Can Ellie take over some of the comments there?
But somebody's very encouraged about the natural drainage system, how it created opportunities for all the plantings and the variety of style and types of housing. So, they're basically reinforcing the kinds of things I had to say. This is somebody who lives near High Point now, and it's not Helen.
Yeah, so you all can put any questions you have for Tom in the Q&A. I think right now you're looking at the chat, Tom.
Well, okay.
But you can also click on the Q&A there.
Yeah. So Laura made a comment about how you met most of your goals. It seems like you met most of your goals for the project. I should put my glasses on. If not all of them. And I know you talk about this in your book. I know that for you, one of your pain points was not having a grocery store in the neighborhood. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I'd be glad to talk about it. High Point was a food desert. All of Del Ridge is really a food desert, and one of the goals we had was to get a grocery store. When I first started, about 3 months after I started, we actually had an offer from a grocery store to buy. I can talk about what it's in the book. Albertsons to build a grocery store. They came in with a developer who had done mixed use sites before. And they were going to put the grocery store on the basically an apartment building on top of the grocery store. It was going to be on 35th. I was pretty green then. Well, I mean green in a negative way. I was pretty not very experienced about this issue, and I didn't really understand how unusual it was, and what a great opportunity it was to actually have a developer who wanted to do a grocery store. And they came in with their plans, and I looked at them. And we were doing this new urbanist plan, and one of the strong principles of new urbanism is you put the parking behind a commercial site. You don't put it in front. You don't want to see cars from the street when you look at a building, and that's what they were doing. And looking back at it, I think I made a mistake and said, well, we have to have a site plan that puts the cars out of the way or on the ground or something like that. And I really didn't do my due diligence to understand what Albertsons is about. They're a different kind of grocery store. And if you look at Albertsons buildings in the Seattle area, they all have parking in front. They're all identical in terms of what they are. And I didn't realize that was a point that they weren't willing to compromise on. And I was too new at doing this to work it out. And so we lost them. And we spent the next basically 7 or 8 years trying to find another grocer who would come in. And of course, the bottom fell out of the economy, so we couldn't find one. And we never were able to find a grocery which would have been a real benefit to the community. So that was a mistake that we made.
Tom, John Alexander has a question about how you implemented the Breathe Easy Homes program to the remainder of the homes. I think you said that 22 of the homes were Breathe Easy homes.
Well, it was actually 60. 22 of them were deconstructed.
Oh, got it.
It ended up being 60, and we had a whole crew of people and got some grant money who recruited families to live in the Breathe Easy houses, and it turns out it was very hard. We put some conditions on them: no smoking in the house, no furry pets. You had to have a physical before you came in, and one during, then one a year after. And it was a challenge to find the families to live there, but we found them, and they, based on the study we did, they really benefited from their families have really benefited from having lived there.
To that question, can you talk more about the funding of the development and what kind of grants may have been involved?
Yeah. I'm grabbing, you can't see, here's the book, because it's laid out there. It was all made possible by a Hope 6 grant of $35 million. That helped start it and helped kickstarted it. We got both, not only the $35 million, but we got subsidies for the 600 lifetime, basically subsidies for the 600 units, and how much we needed in order to have so that low-income families can live there. But just the summary is that we had private investment of about $285 million, other public funding, including some grants from the state, $106,000, tax exempt funding, $68,000, tax credit, partnership equity, and the Hope 6 grant that I mentioned. So the total that was like $550,000. So it's we were able to leverage that initial. I'm sorry, it's $550 million. Yeah, because it was 35 million from the Hope 6 grant. So it's very expensive to do what we did, and some of those programs are available still, and some of them are not. And based on what happens on November 3rd, we might actually have some of those programs to support housing in the future.
We've got two questions here that are sort of related, so I'll ask them together. What is the definition of affordable that SHA used, and what are the typical rents?
Well, let me answer the second one first. Low income people, if they're at I think below 50% of the median income, and most of them are below 30% of the median income, pay 1/3 of their income for rent. That's it. And as long as their income is low, then that's what they pay. So they can pay $100 or $200, and as long as their rents are low. Now there was the other question was what people's incomes were. I don't think that was that.
What are the typical rents? Like, is there a standard rent structure, or is it all solely based on income?
It's based on income, totally based on income. I mean, what happens if you're allowed, if you move into High Point, you get one of the low income units, and then your job, you get more money, and your income goes up, and you're no longer low income. You actually get to stay at High Point as long as you want, and then you basically then pay market rate prices for your rent. And I don't know off the top of my head what those are for 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. But whatever the general market rate is what people pay if their income has gone up. I think there was another question there too.
Do residents pay monthly HOA dues? So I think you're referring to or asking maybe about rental houses or homeowners. The person didn't state their name.
Yeah,
but...
well, I can break that out. The low income renters just pay a third of their income, and the housing authority contributes a certain amount every month to something called the Open Space Association that helps maintain the whole grounds. Now, separately for homeowners, there's an HOA, homeowners association, that they pay into it. And Helen, you know better than I do what that happens to be, because you live there, and I'm sure it's changed since I lived there, and I don't even remember what it was when I was living there.
It depends if you're an attached unit or a detached.
Right, yeah, because you're doing replacements.
Yeah, so they range for an attached unit. The HOA dues range between $200 a month and maybe $385 a month. And if you're a detached, it's I think somewhere around $60, $70. Yeah.
Because then they have to replace their roofs by themselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Purchased properties, do the owners own the land their townhome is on, or does the housing authority?
Well, that was a philosophical decision we made early, and one of the key income streams for making it all work was the sale of the houses. And so we decided to do them all fee simple, and not hold on the land and create a land trust of some kind, just to make it simpler and to be able to get more money from the sale of the houses. One of the things we did do, that's a little hybrid of it, is that when a builder bought us, let's say 10 lots, and they told us how many units they were going to put on it, and we worked that out, and then they told us what price they would charge for the units. And 2 years later, if the housing market had escalated, and they ended up selling the houses for, let's say, 30% more than they had told us 2 years earlier, we did a revenue sharing with them, and we were able to reap some of the increase in value of the houses over time. So it was kind of backed into some of those issues of who benefited from the land and the sale price of the land.
I think that's all for questions. Oh, nope. Laura asks, I know a few projects are just finishing up. Will that be the end of the development, or are there still lots?
Well, no, High Point is now finished. I just went the other day and looked at the last house that they're building, and so if you live in the south end of the site, they're actually going to finish paving the street because they were waiting for those last houses to be sold. So High Point is done. And I think just in the nick of time, because the entitlements have kind of expired from the city. Yeah. So they gave a long time, but it's been a long time to get
one more question popped up in here. Is High Point as diverse now compared to pre-development?
No, it's not, because pre-development there were 617 units or something like that, and they were all low income. There were in that part of the diversity. Now there are 600 low income units, so there are a few less. But then there are 600 for sale units that are mostly middle income, that are middle income families, and they're still, relatively diverse, but so it's a different, it's not as diverse, and it's a much more mixed community than it was previously, and that was the goal that we were after.
All right, I don't see any more questions here, so I'm going to release everyone back to the floor for networking and table chat. So Tom, if you want to head back to your table, we can people pop in and join you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming and hearing the story. I never get tired of telling it, and I was very happy to tell the marketing side of the story, because mostly that's not what people ask about. But it was where a lot of our effort went into it, and gave me a chance to rethink how we did it and why it worked.
Excellent.
So
yeah, thank you,
thanks.
Tom.